In the darkness of the far future, there is only war. But before the last stars fade, before the final prayers echo into the void, one question still burns through the ages like a wound that cannot heal. Was it ever meant to be this way? The 41st Millennium is not a future. It is an ending, stretched thin, trembling, gasping across the vast corpse of what was once mankind's dominion. Imagine it. 1,000,000 worlds burning with faith and madness, where every breath is a prayer and every sunrise is a lie. A galaxy not thriving, but enduring. The Imperium of man, the greatest empire ever built, rots beneath the weight of 10,000 years of decay. And yet, it lives. For in this age, faith is stronger than reason, and ignorance is a weapon sharper than truth. Once mankind reached for the stars as gods in waiting. They believed the universe was theirs to command. They forged machines that could think, ships that could sail across the tides of the Imperium, that cursed sea of souls beyond reality. But hubris has a scent. The gods of that realm, beings of thought and terror, smelled it, and they remembered mankind's arrogance. Then came fire. Now the emperor of mankind, the master of humanity, sits upon the golden throne of terror. A god without voice, without movement, without flesh. His body is a desiccated husk, yet his mind, bound in eternal agony, holds the light that guides his species through the storms of the warp. Each day, 1,000 souls are fed to his throne, sacrificed to keep a single flickering beacon alive. The Astronomicon, the psychic star that allows his servants to travel the void. They call him immortal, eternal, divine. But listen closely to the silence beneath the hymns, and you will hear the truth. The Emperor is dying, and as he dies, the galaxy unravels. From holy terror to the rim of the galaxy, humanity drowns in its own devotion. The ecclesiarchy demands worship not for wisdom, but for obedience. To question is heresy. To doubt is death. The Mechanicus, keepers of ancient technology, bow not to understanding but to ritual, whispering prayers to machines that no one truly remembers how to build. In the hive cities of 1,000,000,000 worlds, men are born nameless, live in darkness, and die for reasons they will never know. This is the Imperium. An empire built not on hope, but on fear. Yet still, its people believe. They believe in the Emperor's light, though it burns them blind. They believe that to die for him is the highest grace, and when the enemy comes, alien, heretic, or demon, they will take up their lasguns and march into the fire chanting his name. Because in the 41st Millennium, faith is the only weapon that never fails. But there are other powers in this age, ancient, hungry, and patient. The galaxy is vast, and mankind's empire, though immense, is only a flickering torch against the dark. Beyond its borders, the stars belong to the alien. The Eldar, once gods among mortals, are now a dying race haunted by their own sins. Their laughter echoes across the warp through the Prince of Pleasure, she who thirsts, a god born from their decadence. The orcs, green and endless, are a storm that never ceases. Creatures of war who live to fight, who breathe destruction as naturally as air. And from the cold, dark beyond the galaxy's rim come the Tyranids, a hunger without face or end, consuming all life until nothing remains. And then there are the Necrons, the oldest of all, silent kings of metal, long entombed beneath dead suns. They awaken now, one tomb world at a time, seeking to reclaim the stars that were once theirs before flesh betrayed them. Their bodies are steel, their hearts cold algorithms, their souls traded away for eternity. To them, humanity is not even an enemy. It is an infestation. Yet none of these horrors compare to what stirs within, for the greatest threat to mankind lies not in the alien stars, but within its own soul. The warp, the sea of madness from which all psychic power flows, is not empty. It teems with gods born of mortal thought, Khorne, the lord of blood, Nurgle, the father of decay, Tzeentch, the architect of fate, and Slaanesh, the dark prince of excess. They whisper to mortals, promising power, immortality, freedom. Their demons take form in nightmares, their cults fester in the underbellies of cities, their corruption seeps into every shadow of the Imperium. Once, they claimed half the galaxy in a single night, the Horus Heresy. It began as loyalty, twisted by pride. The Emperor's favored son, War Master Horus, rose against his father. Brother fought brother. Legions that had conquered the stars now burned them in his name. For 7 years, the galaxy drowned in blood. And when it ended, the Emperor lay broken upon his throne, his empire shattered, his victory a wound that would never heal. 10,000 years have passed since that day. The traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror, a wound in space where reality bleeds into madness. From there, they wage their endless war, their primarchs now demon princes, their armies twisted by the very gods they once swore to destroy. They wait, patient as gods themselves, for the Emperor's light to falter, and it is faltering. The Astronomicon flickers. Warp storms rage where none existed before. Entire systems vanish into shadow. The silence grows longer, the darkness deeper. In the far reaches of the segmentum obscurus, worlds burn not by alien invasion, but by decree of their own masters. Exterminatus. One word, and an entire planet dies. It is the Imperium's most sacred mercy to deny the enemy even the corpse of a world to feed upon. Inquisitors roam these dying realms, their eyes cold, their faith absolute. They are judge, jury, and executioner. They speak with the Emperor's voice, or what remains of it. In their service, even truth is a weapon, and yet even among them corruption grows, because power demands belief, and belief demands blindness. In the catacombs beneath Terra, the vaults tremble. The Mechanicus murmurs of failing systems, of ancient seals weakening. Some whisper that the Golden Throne is failing, that the Emperor's spirit stretched across millennia flickers like the dying light of a candle. Others say he dreams, and if the Emperor dreams, who is listening? Across the stars, the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, fight to hold back oblivion. Each one a warrior of impossible might, clad in ceramite and faith, a demigod among mortals. But even they are fractured. Once united under the Emperor's will, now they are divided into chapters. Thousands of warrior cults with their own relics, their own sins. They fight not for glory, but because there is nothing else left to fight for. Some are lost to madness, some to pride, some to the whisper of the warp, and yet they endure, because in this age, survival is victory. Somewhere in the eastern fringe a new power rises, a blue-skinned race that speaks of unity, of reason, the toe. They believe in the greater good, a doctrine of harmony and progress. They build while humanity burns. They reach out their hand when the Imperium answers with fire. For in the eyes of the ecclesiarchy even hope is heresy, and so the cycle continues. Faith becomes tyranny, survival becomes slaughter, hope becomes blasphemy, and all the while the stars grow colder. But there are whispers, faint, forbidden, that something stirs beneath the veil of time. Prophecies carved in blood and starlight speak of a second coming, of an emperor reborn. Some claim he walks again in secret, hidden among the stars. Others say he will rise only when all light is gone, when humanity's final prayer fades into silence. And on the distant world of Cadia, the fortress that stood for 10,000 years, the sky itself tore open. The cicatrix maledictum, the great rift, half the galaxy swallowed by warp storm and shadow, the light of the Emperor fractured, the Imperium divided. And from that wound, something looked back. A voice older than empires, colder than gods, whispering through the void. The galaxy belongs to the dead. You are only living in its shadow. Now the age of ending begins. Worlds fall. Faith falters. The Emperor's light wanes. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, a secret long buried begins to stir. A name forgotten, a truth forbidden. And when it wakes, the galaxy will remember why it should have stayed asleep. The 41st Millennium has no heroes, only survivors, and soon, even they will be gone. The galaxy belongs to the dead. You are only living in its shadow. The voice fades, but the echo remains, not sound, but memory. Across 1,000 worlds, the words are not heard, yet somehow felt. A tremor in the soul, a whisper that cuts through the armor of faith. The priests call it a test. The soldiers call it madness. But in the silent halls of terror, where the air itself trembles with the hum of the golden throne, no one dares to speak of it at all. In the endless night above Cadia's ruins, war drifts like ash. A lone guardsman stands upon the shattered wall of Kasser Kraf, his lasgun long empty. Around him the sky burns with impossible color, a wound where stars once were. He can still hear the chant of the commissar, though the man's head was taken hours ago. For the Emperor, over and over, until the words stopped meaning anything. The soldier looks up at the rift, that howling storm of gods and madness, and wonders if the Emperor can still see them, and if he can, why he has not wept. Far away, on Terra, in the sanctum beneath the ecclesiarchal palace, a cardinal kneels before a statue carved from the bones of saints. The air smells of incense and old blood. His lips move, but his prayer is not for salvation. It is for silence, for the whispers in his mind to stop. They began after Cadia fell. At first faint like the rustle of robes in an empty chapel. Now they call his name. He dares not tell the others. They would burn him for heresy. Yet somewhere within, he knows the voice that calls. It is not a demon. It is him. Aboard the battle barge Unyielding Resolve, the Space Marines of the Black Templars prepare for crusade. Bolter shells are anointed in oil. Blades are kissed with the blood of martyrs. The chaplain's voice booms through the sanctum, heavy as thunder. Doubt is the weapon of the enemy. Faith is our shield. But behind his helm, even he cannot forget the transmission they intercepted, a signal from the Great Rift, claiming to be from a Primarch long thought dead. It spoke of rebirth, of betrayal, of the Emperor's second war. The chaplain sealed it from his brethren, branding it false. Yet when he sleeps, he dreams of it still. In the cold manufactorums of Mars, the priests of the Omnissiah labor without rest. Sparks rain down like holy embers. Amagos Biologis dissects the corpse of a fallen grey knight, his organs still pulsing with psychic residue. It is forbidden work. The body should have been burned, but the Magos has seen the patterns in the flesh, the runes etched in gene code. They are not human. They are not even of this galaxy, and yet somehow they bear the Emperor's signature. On the agri-world of Lascara 4, the people kneel at dawn as the sky glows red with orbital fire. They do not know why the Astra Militarum came. They do not know why the heavens burn. They only know the priests told them this was judgment. A single man stands apart. An old farmer, his face carved by sun and grief. He remembers the time before the war, before the tithes took his sons. He looks up at the ships and whispers, "If this is his will, then may he choke on it." Moments later the sky falls, and his prayer is answered in silence. Aboard the inquisitorial vessel Pax Mortis, Inquisitor Serana Holt studies the fragments of prophecy recovered from Cadia's ruin. Each word glows faintly with psychic heat, as though the parchment itself remembers pain. The Emperor's light shall flicker, and his sun shall rise in shadow. She reads it again and again, until her vision bleeds red. The High Lords would erase these words if they knew. But Holt has seen too much to burn truth for comfort. She wonders, what if the Emperor never meant to be worshipped? What if faith itself is the heresy? In a forgotten hive on Necromunda, a child is born beneath the grinding roar of industry. The midwife screams as the infant's eyes open, golden, luminous, unnatural. The Arbites arrive before the umbilical is cut. The mother weeps, begging for mercy, but the enforcers do not answer. They take the child away to a ship cloaked in silence. No one speaks of it again, yet in the deepest vaults of the Inquisition, a report is logged. Subject 47, potential alpha-grade psyker, genetic markers, matching unknown Terran sequence, possible divine anomaly. The Imperium marches on, worlds burn, and the Administratum writes their epitaphs in ink made of the dead. To the common man, nothing changes. Trains still bring bodies to the front. Priests still promise paradise in exchange for obedience. But across the galaxy, small fractures spread, ideas too dangerous to name. That perhaps the Emperor does not hear their prayers. That perhaps he never did. Atop the wall of a fortress monastery, a lone space marine of the Ultramarines chapter watches the night. He remembers Guilliman's return, the reborn Primarch who now leads the Imperium's crusades. The soldiers cheered, the priests declared miracles, but he saw the doubt in their eyes. The Emperor's son walks among them again, yet he does not speak of his father as a god. The Marine recalls Guilliman's words, "He was a man, the greatest of us, but still a man." The chaplains called it metaphor, but deep down, the Marine wonders if that was the closest thing to truth he's ever heard. In the underhalls of terror, the Sisters of Silence stand guard before the Eternity Gate. Their faces are hidden, their tongues bound by vow. One among them, a young null named Irina, feels a tremor beneath her feet. The light of the golden throne flickers. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the psychic hum stops. A silence deeper than death floods her mind, and in that silence, she hears a breath. Not dying, awakening. The Mechanicus call it fluctuation. The Ecclesiarchy calls it blasphemy. The Inquisition calls it impossible. But the Astronomicon has begun to shift, not dim, but move. It no longer points solely to terror. A second light burns faintly from the eastern fringe, faint but unmistakable, and with it comes a signal, ancient and human, repeating one phrase in a voice like thunder. Mankind's destiny was never to worship, but to become. In the desert world of Acheron, a regiment of the Imperial Guard fights a war no one remembers starting. The enemy is unseen, the sky red with dust. A Vox officer listens to the static, and among the crackling she hears music, a hymn once sung in the cathedrals of Holy Terra. She removes her helmet. For a moment the battlefield disappears. She sees a city bathed in gold, filled with laughter and light. Then the shell hits, and she dies smiling, her last thought a question. What if we were meant for more than dying? The Inquisitor Holt descends to the surface of Lascara 4, now a wasteland of glass. She finds a relic buried in the ash, a fragment of armor, ancient, marked with a sigil she cannot identify. Its surface hums with dormant power. As she touches it, a vision floods her mind. The Emperor, standing not in glory but in chains, his eyes open, and he speaks without sound. I am not what they believe. When Holt wakes, her ship is gone. Across the great rift in the haunted light of the warp, a fleet moves unseen. Its banners bear no sigil of chaos, no sign of allegiance. Its leader stands upon the bridge, a figure tall, robed, faceless. In his hand, a weapon older than the Imperium itself. His voice, when it speaks, is quiet, almost gentle. The throne has forgotten its purpose. It is time we remind it. The ship's engines ignite with light like a dying star, and the fleet turns toward Holy Terra. In the halls of the Black Library, the harlequins of the Eldar dance before their god of masks. The Shadow Seer pauses mid-step, her eyes turning to something unseen. The human god stirs, she whispers, but not as they hope. The others fall silent, for even they, who have seen the death of empires, shiver at the sound of awakening divinity. Back on Terra, beneath the crust of the throne, engineers of the Mechanicus work in terror. Systems once stable for millennia now scream with feedback. The throne's energy coils crackle with light. Amagos tries to override the conduits, and dies as his body combusts into radiant flame. The light spreads, consuming the machinery, reaching toward the sarcophagus at its heart. The Emperor's body convulses once, as though gasping for air. Then, stillness. The ecclesiarch gathers his priests. The news cannot leave this chamber. The throne has failed for 7 seconds, 7 eternal, impossible seconds. During that time, the Astronomicon burned brighter than it has in 10,000 years. Ships across the galaxy report visions, a figure walking through light, his face hidden, his eyes like suns. Some say it was the Emperor reborn. Others say it was something else wearing his skin. Aboard the unyielding Resolve, the Black Templars receive a new order. Terra under quarantine. All fleets recalled. Silence all channels. The chaplain feels the old fear rise again. He goes to the chapel alone and kneels before the altar. Lord of mankind, he whispers, if you live, guide us. If you are dead, tell us what to worship. The candles flicker, a single flame gutters out. From the darkness beyond, a voice answers. It is not divine. It is familiar. It is human. And somewhere deep beneath the surface of the dying earth, within the vaults no mortal has walked in 10,000 years, a door sealed since the heresy begins to open. Metal grinds against stone. Light bleeds into the dark. Inside something stirs, ancient, silent, waiting. A hand of gold. A face unremembered, a name the galaxy forgot to fear. And as the first hiss of air escapes that chamber, a single terrible thought spreads across the stars like a plague. The Emperor was never alone. The door opened with the sound of dying metal, ancient and final. Dust poured like smoke from its frame, a breath exhaled after 10,000 years. Deep beneath the throne world, light bled from the wound in the earth. Not gold, not divine, but cold and white, like the light of a star seen through tears. And from that chamber came the first movement Terra had felt since the age of apostasy. A shadow uncoiled, something remembered, something forgotten by design. On the surface, the air was thick with prayer. Pilgrims filled the causeways of the Imperial Palace, their chants rising into the smoke of 1,000 censers. "He lives! He walks again!" they cried. None knew where the words began, but they spread faster than fire. The priests tried to silence them, but faith once unchained is not easily caged. Beneath the towers of gold, zealots began to gather, some to worship, others to watch, all to believe. The High Lords convened in the Chamber of Concordance. Their faces were pale in the light of hollow sigils. The Fabricator General spoke first. The throne had awakened systems sealed since the dark age of technology. The Master of the Administratum countered, heretics spread lies of resurrection. None could agree on what had happened. Only the Grand Inquisitor remained silent, eyes fixed on a single rune pulsing at the table's edge, a code older than the Imperium itself, recently reactivated, Project Sigillite. In the catacombs of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the data loom screamed as forbidden archives came alive. Machine priests scrambled through smoke and sparks, reciting litanies of suppression. But no lock held. A forgotten voice rose from the vox, metallic, calm, unmistakable. If the Emperor was man, it said, then who kept his secrets? On a desolate moon orbiting the rift's edge, the Black Templar chaplain knelt before a broken shrine. The vox crackled with static. Then, amid the white noise, came a whisper, the same voice that had haunted his dreams. You prayed to a corpse. Now listen to the one who remembers him alive. The chaplain's breath caught. Who speaks? He demanded. The answer came like a sigh through rusted steel. Malcador remembers. At that name, something old stirred in the soul of humanity. Malcador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, the one who built the Imperium's heart and died upon the throne in his place. But Malcador was dust, erased, sanctified, forgotten. To speak his name was to court excommunication, and yet across the stars the whisper spread. The Sigillite lives. In the Schola Progenium of Gathi's Prime, young cadets recited the catechisms of obedience. One girl faltered. Her instructor struck her down, demanding the next verse. Instead, she lifted her eyes and said quietly, "The Emperor was not alone." The class fell silent. The instructor froze, and then, one by one, the children repeated her words, a hymn of forbidden unity. By dawn, the school was ashes. Inquisitor Holt emerged from the warp, her ship scarred, her eyes hollow. She had seen things beyond understanding, visions of terror as it was, not as the ecclesiarchy described. She saw the Emperor and Malcador standing before the throne, not as god and servant, but as equals, two architects of humanity's destiny. But in the vision's end, it was not the Emperor who ascended the throne. It was Malcador, his mind breaking, his soul burning, while the Emperor walked into the void. If that vision was truth, the foundation of 10,000 years was a lie. The God Emperor, savior of mankind, might not even be the one upon the throne. Holt knew she could not speak it. But the truth has gravity. Already, rogue inquisitors called themselves the Remembered, claiming their mission was to reveal the true architect of humanity's survival. They carried relics marked with the sigil of the Sigillite, an eye within a circle, and their enemies began to vanish. On Macragge, Guilliman stood before the Strategium's viewport, staring into the wound of the galaxy. He felt it before the astropaths reported it, the Astronomican's second light pulsing from Terra's shadow. His honor guard waited in silence as he whispered, "Father," or "Ghost." When the Psyker's cries reached him, images of two thrones burning in mirrored fire, he ordered a fleet to prepare for departure. To Terra, the galaxy convulsed. Wars erupted not between Xenos and man, but between believers and reformers. On shrine worlds, priests burned libraries of scripture, rewritten overnight by unseen hands. On frontier worlds, missionaries tore down icons and replaced them with twin statues. The Emperor and the Sigillite standing together as one. Faith fractured into mirror shards, each cutting deeper than the last. In the silence of the black ships, Psykers began to dream in unison. Their screams echoed across the void, visions of a city beneath Terra, bathed in white flame, where a second throne awaited its occupant. The astropaths could not translate the message that followed, only the sensation. Something is waking, and it remembers everything. Aboard the unyielding Resolve, the chaplain led his crusade toward the Sol system. His brothers questioned his orders, for the Inquisition had forbidden all passage near Terra. He answered only with scripture, but his words trembled. In his private quarters he recorded his confession. If the Emperor is not the one upon the throne, then what have we been worshipping? If faith was forged upon a lie, what sin is left unspoken? On Holy Terra, riots ignited in the cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy. Pilgrims demanded to see the throne. The Adepta Sororitas formed walls of steel and fire, cutting through the crowds with bolters and tears. The ecclesiarch himself was found dead, not murdered, not poisoned, but with his veins filled with molten gold. The message carved upon his chest read, "He rises, not as God, but as man." In the void near Mars, an impossible signal was detected, identical to the Emperor's psychic signature, but weaker, fragmented, mortal. The Mechanicus broadcast prayers of fear and awe. When the vox cleared, a face flickered across the transmission, aged, scarred, unmistakable. It was him, but not radiant, not divine, human, tired, his eyes full of grief. "You have forgotten," the figure whispered. "You worshipped my tomb." Then the signal cut. Guilliman received the message in silence. His officers knelt, trembling. "It cannot be," they murmured, but the Primarch only stared into the hololith, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps it always was," he said. Across the galaxy, confusion became revelation, faith became doubt, doubt became war. New cults rose, calling themselves the true Imperium. They preached that the Emperor had never died, that his divine essence left the throne to walk among the stars, leaving his mortal vessel behind. The ecclesiarchy branded them heretics. The heretics called the ecclesiarchy blind. Between them, entire worlds burned to cinders. Inquisitor Holt, now hunted by her own kind, reached the underhalls of Terra through forgotten tunnels. The walls trembled, the golden throne blazed like a dying sun. Through the smoke, she saw two forms, one bound in metal, the other standing free. The bound one, skeletal, golden, pulsing with fading light, the other shrouded, radiant in silence. "Which are you?" she whispered, "the god or the man?" The standing figure turned, and for a moment she saw both faces, the Emperor's and Malcador's, overlapping, as if time itself could not decide. "There is no God," the voice said. "Only the burden of men pretending to be one." Above Terra, fleets assembled. The Black Templars arrived first, then the Ultramarines, then the ships of Mars, all orbiting, waiting, none daring to descend. The Astronomicon pulsed like a heartbeat, irregular, uncertain. The rift flared brighter than ever before, and then silence. From the void beyond the galaxy's rim, the tyrannid swarms paused in their advance. From the eye of terror, demonic storms waned. The orcs, the Eldar, even the Necrons felt it, a stillness that was not peace, but expectation. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. On Terra, the throne cracked. The sound was not thunder, but memory. The sound of 10,000 years shattering at once. Light burst from the sanctum, blinding, white as the birth of stars. The Adeptus Custodes fell to their knees, their souls echoing with words they could not deny. When the light faded, two thrones stood where one had been. On the first sat the Emperor, or the being that called itself so, unmoving, silent, divine. On the second sat the man who had been forgotten, his face weary, his gaze alive. Malcador, or something far greater wearing his form, looked upon the galaxy with both sorrow and resolve. "You mistook my silence for death," he said. "But the truth was always divided. The god and the guardian, the myth and the maker. One saved humanity's soul, the other its will." And as he spoke, the Astronomicon split. Two lights burned now across the void, one golden, one white, two paths for mankind, two fates. Across the stars, psychers screamed as visions flooded them, twin empires rising, not united but opposed, one of faith, one of reason, both claiming to serve humanity. Guilliman fell to his knees as the signal reached him. He understood, too late, that the Emperor's greatest war was never against Xenos, demon or heretic, but against himself. The galaxy wept fire. Civil wars erupted in every sector, fleets divided, planets split in allegiance. Brother turned against brother. The imperial creed fractured into two gospels, the Church of the Golden Throne and the Order of the Remembered. And through the chaos, one truth whispered through every soul, from the lowliest worker to the mightiest Astartes. The Emperor was not the savior of mankind, he was the prison that kept it asleep. Now, the prison had opened, and the galaxy would finally awaken. The twin lights burned across the void, and for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity had a choice. One golden, steady, unyielding. The Emperor enthroned, the God eternal. The other, white, flickering human, Malcador reborn, the voice of reason, the memory of what was lost. Across the galaxy, those lights split the night in two, and with them, the Imperium itself. On Terra, the air trembled with hymns and screams. The ecclesiarchy declared the second light a heresy of the warp, an illusion sent to test their faith. But the people had seen it. Pilgrims flooded the streets, tearing down icons, repainting shrines with twin halos, one divine, one mortal. The sororitas opened fire on the crowds, bolters roaring beneath stained glass. The faithful did not flee. They burned, singing the Emperor's name and the sigillites in the same breath. Guilliman watched from orbit, his fleet encircling the world he once called home. His counselors begged him to intervene, to end the heresy before it consumed everything. He said nothing. His eyes never left the surface of Terra. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet, hollow. When God's full, mortals will call it sunrise. On Mars, the Mechanicus split asunder. The red priests of the machine god turned on one another. Some claimed the white light was the true signal, the awakening of the all-knowledge the Emperor had buried. Others clung to the old faith, chanting the canticles of the Omnissiah until the forges themselves wept iron. The Magi detonated entire manufactorums to keep sacred knowledge from falling into false hands. For a week, Mars burned red and gold. Then it fell silent, its orbit strewn with debris like beads of prayer scattered by a dying god. The Inquisition fractured. Some vanished into the rift, claiming they would follow the man who remembered truth. Others pledged to remain on Terra and guard the Golden Throne until time itself ended. Inquisitor Holt, hunted by both, sent her final message into the void. "I have seen him weep," she said. "If he was ever divine, it was in his sorrow, not his wrath." Her ship was last seen descending toward Luna. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, the chaplain knelt before a cracked relic of the Emperor's sigil. His armor was blackened by war, his voice a whisper. "Faith or truth," he murmured. "One demands blindness, the other pain." His brothers waited for orders. He gave them none. Outside, the ship drifted between the two lights, caught between God and man. In the eastern fringe, the Astra Militarum fought itself. Regiments that once shared oaths now bled for different lights. Commissars executed soldiers for hesitation. Priests executed commissars for pride. In the smoke-choked trenches of Varn 9, a guardsman pressed a bloodied Aquila to his chest and whispered to no one, "We were promised eternity." The reply came only in the sound of distant artillery, the voice of a god too tired to answer. The warp howled. Where the two lights met, storms tore through the Imperium. Demons screamed in confusion, their gods momentarily blinded by contradiction. Korn's rage faltered, Nurgle's laughter stilled, even Tzeentch's whispers tangled upon themselves. For the first time since the birth of chaos, the warp hesitated. And in that hesitation, something new began to take shape. Not a god, not yet, but an idea given weight. Humanity unbound. Within the palace, the custodes stood in silent ranks, golden and unmoving. They did not kneel to either light. Their oaths were to the Emperor, but their eyes had seen both thrones. Some began to dream. Dreams of the Emperor walking beside them, mortal and wounded, asking forgiveness. When they woke, they found their weapons slick with their own blood, and none could explain how. The Sisters of Silence felt it more deeply. Their null field shuddered as the warp's heartbeat faltered. Some fell to their knees in agony. Others tore out their tongues anew, afraid their voices might carry words not their own. In the stillness between pulses of light, one whispered, the first word she had spoken in centuries, mercy. Guilliman landed on Terra at last. The world was in ruins, faith reduced to fire, loyalty to ash. He walked through streets lined with corpses, each clutching a relic, each burned by devotion. When he reached the palace gates, he found the banners of both lights hanging side by side, tattered, stained, inseparable. The custodes allowed him passage. None dared speak. Within the Sanctum Imperialis, the air was alive with static. Two thrones stood side by side, as they had since the division. The first shone gold, the Emperor's still and unmoving. The second glowed white, its occupant cloaked in shadow, alive but unseen. Guilliman fell to one knee. "Father," he said, "tell me which truth I am to serve." The shadow turned its head, and a voice answered, not divine, not thunderous, but human. "Serve neither. Build what must come after us." Guilliman looked up. "You ask me to betray everything we built." The voice replied, calm, weary. "You cannot betray what no longer exists." And then the figure rose from the throne. The custodes flinched. The light of the Astronomicon wavered. The Emperor remained motionless. Guilliman took a step back, realizing what the galaxy had refused to believe. The man walking toward him was not Malcador resurrected, but the Emperor's mind, shed of divinity, separated from the husk that held his godhood. The truth was unbearable. The Emperor had split himself. The god remained upon the throne. The man walked free, one bound by power, the other by conscience. It was the only way he could survive eternity, divided between belief and memory. Humanity had not discovered a second savior. It had witnessed the Emperor's final act of self-denial. Guilliman trembled. "You've condemned us to war." The Emperor's human voice replied, "No, I have given you a choice." But choice was the one thing the Imperium could never bear. Across the galaxy, as word spread, through psychers, visions, whispers, fleets declared allegiance to one side or the other. The God Emperor's hosts fortified Terra's core. The remembered legions rallied near the rift, where the white light burned brightest. In between, countless systems burned in indecision, their leaders paralyzed by revelation. On the shrine world of Damaris, a confessor stood before his congregation, tears streaking his face. "I have preached lies," he said, "and yet those lies gave you strength. Is truth worth the death of faith?" He looked to the cruciform effigy above him and found no answer. Outside, orbital bombardment began. The chaplain of the unyielding resolve received Guilliman's summons. His brothers swore oaths to the golden light, but he hesitated. "We fought for his glory," said one Marine. "Then we will fight for his truth," answered another. The chaplain walked among them, touching their armor, whispering blessings that meant nothing and everything. "We fight for him," he said at last, though he no longer knew which him he meant. The Mechanicus remnants aboard Mars sent a final transmission before contact was lost. The throne is consuming its world. The Omnicia feeds upon his own creation. Then silence. Mars went dark. Guilliman gathered his commanders in the ruins of the Strategium. Maps flickered between realities, half the Imperium under the golden light, half beneath the white. "There is no victory," said one admiral. "Only survival." Guilliman looked at him, expression unreadable. "Then we will survive until victory forgets what it was." The White Emperor, the human half, wandered the ruins of the palace gardens. Statues of saints lay in pieces. Beneath a broken archway he paused, touching the dust with trembling fingers. "Do they still pray?" he asked a passing custodian. "Yes, my lord," the warrior replied. "To which god?" The custodian hesitated. "Both." The man smiled faintly. "Then perhaps they have finally understood." In orbit, the Astronomicon pulsed irregularly. Psychers across the galaxy bled from their eyes as visions tore through their minds. Two Imperiums reflected in one mirror, both destined to collide. The warp began to twist anew, no longer under the dominion of chaos, but under something colder. The will of mankind itself, fracturing reality through belief. On a nameless world at the galaxy's edge, a single guardsman stood in a trench, staring at the twin lights above. His regiment was gone, his faith gone with them. He whispered a prayer not to God or Emperor, but to anyone who could still listen. "If you are both real," he said, "then stop fighting. We're dying for shadows." The only reply was the wind, carrying the faint echo of a heartbeat too vast to comprehend. The warp storms began again. Not the howling madness of chaos, but a calm, deliberate surge, as if the universe itself were bracing for something inevitable. Ships vanished mid-void. Planets screamed in psychic unison. Every astropath heard the same phrase in 1,000 languages. The War of the Two Suns begins. Guilliman returned to his flagship. From orbit, Terra looked fragile, too sacred to touch, too corrupted to save. His officers awaited his command. He stared into the twin lights burning at the edge of sight. "We are about to become gods of our own extinction," he said. "May we prove ourselves worthy of the end." The fleets began to move, the gold toward preservation, the white toward rebirth. Between them lay everything humanity had ever been, every memory, every sin, every prayer. And in the heart of the palace, as the last light of day touched the twin thrones, the Emperor's divine half stirred for the first time in 10 millennia. The sound was not breath, nor voice, but the crack of inevitability breaking. The air thickened. Time slowed. The universe leaned closer. Then, silence. The kind of silence that comes before a scream. The kind that means history is about to change forever. The scream never came, only the light. Two suns, gold and white, collided across the stars. For one heartbeat the galaxy ceased to exist. Warp and real space fused into a single blinding truth. Every man, every god, every daemon felt it. The weight of creation remembering itself. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not war, but the cracking of belief. Terra convulsed beneath the collision. Oceans boiled. The sky split into veins of burning faith. Pilgrims burned alive, their shadows etched into the marble of cathedrals. Above them, two fleets converged. The banners of the Golden Throne and the banners of the Remembered. Faith met truth. Fire met silence. Guilliman stood on the bridge of the avenging sun, his eyes reflecting both lights as they merged into one. "All channels," he said, voice steady. "No more speeches, no more lies. Let the galaxy see what its gods have made." The command relays opened. Across billions of screens, voxcasters, and prayers, humanity watched its own apocalypse. The first volleys tore through the void like divine judgment. Lance strikes and plasma bursts illuminated the dark like shattered halos. The fleets screamed prayers as they killed their kin. On the command decks, priests anointed cannons with sacred oils. Tech marines whispered the litanies of targeting. The void became scripture written in blood and light. Within the sanctum, the Emperor's divine husk stirred. His eyes, or what remained of them, ignited with dying suns. The cables feeding his body began to rupture, flooding the chamber with arcs of golden lightning. Servitors combusted. The custodes fell to one knee, unable to withstand the psychic roar that followed. The human half, the White Emperor, reached out across the light, his will straining against eternity. "Stop!" His voice shattered 1,000 minds. "They are killing themselves for us." But the divine half did not answer. The god had no voice left, only instinct, only power. The White Emperor screamed, his mortal frame disintegrated into shards of light that scattered across terror. Each fragment burned through stone, armor, and memory, embedding themselves in the souls of those who still dared to hope. Across the world, men and women fell to their knees, their eyes glowing white. "Chosen," whispered a voice inside them, "carry what I cannot." The battlefield changed. The faithful who had prayed to both lights began to glow with the same pallid fire, their wounds sealed, their eyes turned to stars. They moved without fear, neither for gold nor for white, but for something older. The idea of humanity unbroken. The golden fleets saw it as heresy. The white fleets as revelation. Both opened fire. In the trenches of Varn 9, Guardsman Eli Darnell rose from the mud, a hole through his chest. He did not die. He raised his lasgun, glowing white in his hands. "No more gods," he whispered. "Only us." The next volley from orbit erased the continent. Yet his words lingered in the Vox for hours, repeating in static, "Only us." On Mars, the forges reawakened. A voice echoed through the noosphere, neither machine nor man. "The Omnissiah is divided. We must choose which half to preserve." But the forges refused. They built a third path, a massive construct, a hybrid of living flesh and circuitry, rose from the ash, crowned with twin halos of light and fire. It spoke one word in binary and human speech at once: unity. Then Mars imploded, taking half its moons with it. Guilliman's fleet broke through the front line. His flagship dove toward Terra's orbit, its hull aflame with faith and heresy intertwined. "Prepare for descent," he ordered. His adjutant hesitated. "Lord Guilliman, the throne is destabilizing. The Astronomicon—" "I know," Guilliman cut in. "We end this now." The drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. Below, the palace was dying. Statues of saints toppled into oceans of fire. The custodes, golden and silent, fought against their own reflections, visions made flesh, conjured by the warp's collapse. Every blow they struck was against themselves, every death a confession. In the hall of the two thrones, time fractured. The divine emperor's husk rose from his seat, torn free of cables and thrones alike. His body glowed brighter than the suns above. The energy consumed everything around him: marble, gold, prayer, matter itself. His wings of light unfolded, vast enough to burn continents. Guilliman entered the hall, blade drawn. The air tasted like divinity and despair. Before him stood the god he had once called father, and in the reflection of that radiance, the ghost of the man the emperor had once been. "You would destroy all for this," Guilliman said, voice breaking. "All we built, all who believed." The god's voice answered through flame. "They built their chains. I only taught them to worship them." "Then end it," Guilliman whispered. "End you." The Emperor's light faltered. For the first time, hesitation. Then, a whisper from within the blinding storm. "If you would see me fall, you must take my place." Guilliman's hand trembled. He had dreamed this moment since his resurrection, to stand before God and find justice. But now justice meant eternity. He closed his eyes and drove the blade into the Emperor's heart. There was no scream, only silence, deep and endless. The light withdrew into the blade, into Guilliman himself. The divine form collapsed, shattering into dust that drifted through the hall like golden snow. The body of God was gone. The Astronomicon flickered, then died. The galaxy went dark. Across 1,000,000 worlds, psychers dropped dead, their souls extinguished like candles. Warp travel ceased, fleets stranded, armies isolated. The Imperium, the idea of it, died in that instant. But something else lived. The white fragments of the human Emperor's light began to pulse again. Across battlefields and ruins, survivors felt warmth where faith had once been fear. A whisper echoed through the dying Vox. "You are not abandoned." In the ruins of the palace, Guilliman fell to his knees. His armor glowed faintly, cracks of light bleeding from within. The custodes approached, weapons raised, uncertain if he was man or god. "I am neither," he said softly. "I am what he left behind." Beyond Terra, chaos stirred. The gods of the warp laughed and wept in equal measure. For with the death of the Emperor, their greatest adversary had fallen. And yet, so had their leash. Without belief, the warp began to unravel. Demons screamed as their forms disintegrated, swallowed by the silence that followed. On one distant world, the surviving guard built fires from their broken banners. No more prayers, no more orders. They looked to the sky, where the twin suns had become one. "He's gone," one murmured. Another shook his head. "No, he's become us." For the first time in millennia, night was truly black. And in that darkness, humanity began again, blind, terrified, free. Guilliman stood upon the palace's highest spire, staring into the void where the Astronomicon once burned. Behind him, the surviving custodes and Sisters of Silence waited. "What now?" one asked. Guilliman did not turn. "We build a galaxy that no longer needs a god." The wind carried his words through the broken halls, over the oceans of ash, across the graves of saints. Somewhere deep beneath the palace, the last fragment of the Emperor's divine spark still glowed within the blade. Waiting, watching. It pulsed once, a heartbeat in the dark. Then silence again. But in that silence, a new sound began. Small, fragile, human. The sound of a child's cry echoing through the ruins of Terra, the first to be born in the age without gods. The universe listened. The stars held their breath. Something eternal had shifted. The light was gone. The story was not. The fires of Terra had cooled to embers. The palace, once the heart of empire and eternity, now lay quiet beneath a bruised sky. Where the Astronomicon once burned, there was only void, black, endless, merciful. The air carried no hymns now, no sermons, no commands. Only the wind, whispering through corridors of broken marble, where statues of saints stood headless and the thrones of gods stood empty. Guilliman walked alone through the ruins. His armor, cracked and dulled, still shimmered faintly with the golden dust of what had once been divinity. The sword that had slain the Emperor hung at his side, silent, heavy with the echo of what it contained. He paused beneath the shattered dome of the sanctum, where sunlight fell through fractured glass. It painted his face in colors that no longer belonged to banners or legions, but to memory, blue and gold, white and ash. Around him, The custodes and the Sisters of Silence moved like ghosts. They no longer stood guard over a god, but over a tomb that contained the idea of one. Their eyes met his and looked away. They did not ask for orders. There were none left to give. Outside the palace, Terra's soil was fertile again, fed by the ashes of cathedrals and men alike. From the cracks of shattered streets, green shoots began to rise. No one noticed at first. No one prayed over them. They simply grew, unblessed, uncommanded, reaching for a light that no longer judged. The void was quiet. The warp storms had ended, not with victory but exhaustion. The Imperium itself had become still, not gone but muted, as if catching its breath after 10,000 years of screaming. The demons that survived whispered in confusion, bereft of worship. The gods of chaos were silent. Perhaps they too had died when their opposite did, or perhaps they merely slept, waiting for humanity to dream again. Aboard what remained of the avenging sun, fragments of the old Imperium flickered in the data feeds, broken signals, disconnected colonies, isolated worlds, still clinging to ritual and fear. Some declared themselves free, others declared themselves doomed. None agreed on what had happened. Some said the Emperor had returned. Others said he had been devoured by his own light. And a few, the quiet few, said he had become them. On one of those worlds, a desolate moon orbiting the corpse of Mars, a child was born beneath an unlit sky, the firstborn without the Astronomican's gaze. The midwife wept, not from joy or sorrow, but awe. The child's eyes were not gold nor white, but grey, the color of dawn before the sun decides to rise. Across the remnants of the galaxy, humans began to look up and see darkness not as punishment, but as possibility. Ships launched not in faith, but in curiosity. Priests became historians, warriors became farmers, and those who had once burned heretics now lit candles not to gods, but to the memory of what belief had cost them. Guilliman watched it unfold from the shattered throne room. His voice, when he spoke, carried not command, but fatigue. "They will forget," he said to no one. "They must." He touched the armrest of the golden throne. Beneath the dust, the metal was still warm. "He wanted this," he whispered, "an ending that could not be worshipped." From the shadow of the hall, an old woman stepped forward, one of the remembrancers who had survived the purges. Her robes were torn, her data slate flickering. "Then let us remember," she said. "If gods are dead, let mortals become their memory." She began to write. Her words etched not on parchment or cogitator, but into the air itself, carried by the soft hum of the dying planet. In the time after light, we found the quiet truth. That man's greatest sin was not ambition, but obedience. That faith without love becomes hunger. That gods die not because they are false, but because they ask too much. Guilliman listened. His eyes closed. The sound of her voice became distant like rain on glass. In that moment, he thought he heard something. Faint, deep, eternal. Not the Emperor's voice, not the warp, just the heartbeat of the species he had died for. Slow, relentless, alive. The custodes laid down their weapons. The Sisters of Silence removed their masks. The cathedrals were left to crumble, unguarded. In their place, gardens grew, vines winding around relics, trees splitting marble, life reclaiming the architecture of devotion. Pilgrims came still, but not to worship. They came to listen, to remember, to stand among the graves of gods and feel what it meant to be small and unafraid. Far beyond Terra, in the black between stars, the last fragments of the Emperor's light drifted, particles of gold dissolving into the fabric of space. And wherever they touched, life began to stir. On barren worlds, moss formed. In silent seas, plankton shimmered. The divine had not vanished. It had scattered. It had gone where he could not be, everywhere. The remembrancer continued her work until her hands shook and her breath faltered. The galaxy was once ruled by a man who became a god, she wrote. Now it belongs to no one. And in belonging to no one, perhaps it is finally free. She closed the data slate. Her eyes met Guilliman's. Will they ever forgive us? He smiled, weary and faint. Forgiveness is for gods. We have only memory. Night fell over the ruins of the palace. The last light of day touched the broken thrones and lingered, as if reluctant to leave. Guilliman stood between them, the sword at his side, whispering softly, the sound of stars dying in distant silence. He looked upward, where once 2 suns had burned, and found only one pale point of light. He could not tell if it was fading or growing. In time, the remnants of humanity would scatter again. Some would build empires of peace, others of steel. Some would find gods anew, others would curse their names. But none would ever forget the age when faith burned so bright it consumed its own source. And perhaps, somewhere beyond perception, the Emperor, or what remained of him, watched. Not as a god, not as a ruler, but as a witness to his own undoing. Perhaps he smiled, for in his death mankind had finally become what he had always wanted them to be, lost but unchained. The Remembrancer's chronicle ends with one final passage, written in a hand trembling with reverence and exhaustion. We have built 1,000 heavens and burned them all. Perhaps paradise was never meant to be found in light, but in the shadows we leave behind. And as the ink dried, she lifted her eyes to the stars, 1,000 silent witnesses to a story without gods, where humanity walked alone into eternity. The wind moved through the ruins, carrying the dust of gold into the void. It sounded almost like a voice, not divine, not human, but something in between. A whisper to those who might still listen. Do not seek me in the light. I am the silence that follows, and somewhere, beneath the ruins of terror, the first child of the new age took their first step into the dawn. No hymns, no thunder, just breath, and the infinite quiet of a world finally free. The chronicle ends. The stars endure. The story waits. If this tale moved you, if the silence of the far future still echoes in your thoughts, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Leave your thoughts below. Tell me, if the Emperor is gone, what remains of man?